technology is the broader spectrum that needs to come into the conversation of DevOps and culture. And that's why I just changed my title of the talk, Technology, Culture, and Continuous Star, Build Your Own DevOps. So this is the outline. First, I'm going to introduce myself, and then I'm going to go through my top DevOps learning over the years, last 7 or 8 years. And then I'm going to talk about some of the industry focus areas or challenge areas as of today. And then I'm going to talk about what am I doing recently on some of these focus areas. So who am I? My name is Tapabrata. I go by Topo, and that's the name I acquired from my school days. So if you call me Tapabrata, I'll probably not respond because I don't know who you're calling. So call me Topo. I'm a senior distinguished engineer at Capital One, which basically means that I don't have a team, nobody reports to me, I do whatever I feel like. No, not just kidding. I do have a set of things that I need to work on, and that's what I do. I'm also a part of our open source steering committee. I'm a part of open source communities, and that's what I do for my living, and I enjoy it, and I keep learning every day. If I finish the day without learning a new thing, I feel depressed. So that's what I'm like. Now, having said what I do for a living, I'm going to tell you what I am not. So I'm not a DevOps guru or SME or coach because I don't know how to actually coach an enterprise or a company in their DevOps journey. I'm not a guru either because, as I said, essentially I'm a learner. I do not know how to do DevOps. A lot of times people ask me, how do you do DevOps? I said, I really don't know. I can tell you what I have done and what I've worked, but then you got to figure out what needs to be done to do DevOps. The third thing is I cannot even define DevOps, forget about doing DevOps. Again, this is one of the critical areas that we run with friction with each other, whether SRE is the new thing and DevOps is dying, whether DevOpsSec is the doesn't matter, so I am not going to go into definition of DevOps. Before I start, I think these are some of the must-read books if you are in this journey. The Phoenix Project, of course, Continuous Delivery by Jays, DevOps Handbook by Gene, Jays, and John. The Unicorn Project, which is coming out, I think they announced the release already, if I'm not mistaken. Site Reliability Engineering, that's the Google book, and Dora Accelerate. So these are the books that I have read. So I would like to know from this audience who have read, raise your hand if you have read all the books. 3. Raise your hand if you have not read any of these books. All right. So I think you need to take a look at any of these books. Start with Phoenix Project, and then go through your learning process. And by the way, Phoenix Project is just a novel. It's not about IT, day-to-day IT things. So it's a good read. I have read all of these, and my talk is actually based on all these books. Just kidding. So my top DevOps learning in no particular order. And when I say learning, there are underlying set of failures that I'm not going to talk about. Essentially, when you talk about learnings, you basically talk about the successes that you had through your experiments and don't talk about the failures because on the stage, you're not supposed to talk about failures. So again, through the learnings, you'll figure out where the failures happen, and I'm going to kind of briefly hint about those. But these are my learnings that I have seen working in my enterprise as well as many other enterprises. So first of all, as I said, stop defining DevOps. Stop asking the question, what is DevOps? Because it's not going to go anywhere. Instead, ask, why is DevOps? I think that kind of gives you the guts of what is DevOps. In my mind, DevOps is to deliver high-quality software faster, happier, and safer. Now, initially, 4 or 5 years ago, I used to use only deliver high-quality software faster. John Smart from Berkeley's added happier and safer, and I think I fully agree with him because that's one thing very critical that we miss on our day-to-day IT life. We don't talk about people's happiness, people's safety, and we need to talk about that when we talk about DevOps. So again, underlying this principle, underneath this principle, if we can carry on, then we don't need to define what DevOps is, what SRE is, and we can get out of the friction and just actually focus on the things that really matter. The next thing I'm going to talk about is this learning, BYOD, and usually BYOD means build your own device, but in this case, it's build your own DevOps. And the reason I'm saying is this because it's kind of tied to the thing that I just talked about, which is I'm not a DevOps guru. I cannot teach you how to do DevOps. I cannot even define DevOps. So essentially, what it means is look at the other success stories, look at other people's work, and then take the learning from there and try to apply in your enterprise or in your lines of business or your product team or your small component team, whatever that scale is. Because in each case, your implementation, quote unquote, of DevOps is going to be different. And take that from me because I've kind of taken that whole journey through the enterprise. I have seen mainframe, I have seen legacy Java code, I have seen .NET code, I have even seen Visual Basic 6 code, and talk about having DevOps. So the things that actually are impactful in here that forces you to go into this mode of building your own DevOps is number one, startup is not equal to enterprise. If you are a startup and if you are not doing DevOps, shame on you. If you are an enterprise, if you are not doing DevOps, there is a reason behind it. And there are a lot of challenges that I'm going to talk about. So again, startup is not equal to enterprise. If you are a startup, you probably are delivering software at the speed of light. I don't know. But if you're an enterprise, it's a different story. Industry matters. If you are retail versus if you are healthcare versus if you are finance industry, your implementation of DevOps is going to change because your processes, regulations, compliance requirements, et cetera, even technology will be different based upon your industry. Social media post is not a banking transaction. Yes, I love Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I love when I post something. I love watching Netflix, but it really doesn't bother me if one of my posts don't show up in the right time. Even if it doesn't show up ever, I really, it doesn't bother me. But think about 1 penny transaction from one account to another account missing. That will be a huge deal, right? So again, social media post and banking transaction. And the reason I'm saying this is because, again, going back to building your own DevOps mentality, depending upon what it is, your implementation of DevOps is going to be different. Greenfield or legacy. Today, if you are doing a greenfield application, you have to actually go through the DevOps process and implement continuous delivery. But legacy, you have to see what you can do. Two different approaches. I'm not talking about bimodal here because in my mind, bimodal doesn't work. Two-speed doesn't work. Greenfield means, thank you. Greenfield or legacy means in legacy, you have to force yourself to actually implement some of these principles in your application. Monolith versus distributed. We know what I'm talking about here. If it is distributed microservices, yes, I have one microservice, one Lambda function I can deploy to AWS, no sweat. If it is a monolith, like start-based application, it's a different story altogether. Your viewpoint, your implementation, your technical details, your processes, everything will vary based upon what it is. So that's why I say instead of taking somebody's model and try to implement as is in your organization, just go through some of these variations or variability in your organizations, in your product, and see what applies and what does not apply. And not only that, what extra applies to that before you start implementing any of these. So again, build your own DevOps. There is no DevOps in a box. Sorry. If you are looking for a DevOps in a box, there's no box and there's no DevOps in that box either, if you find that box. So again, enforcing the fact that you have to build your own DevOps and just don't take anybody's word as is. My next learning, culture and technology go hand in hand. A lot of times, when you talk about DevOps in big enterprises, we suddenly say it's not about tools, it's about culture. And then go back and ask the developers, what did you do in your DevOps? Well, I have the GitHub, I have the Jenkins pipeline, I have the Cucumber test cases, and I'm publishing to Nexus or Artifactory, and from there I'm launching all that. So there are two different versions from an enterprise perspective, the culture and the technology. And I think it is unfair to any of these transformation processes to actually start with any of these singularly. Meaning that if you just say, first I'm going to start with culture, I don't think that will be successful, because culture change is the toughest thing to do. I lived in India, I spent my childhood here, and then I moved 2 years. I know what a culture change means. So just by starting with a big bang culture change in a big enterprise is not going to work. At the same time, just by starting a technology transformation, just like having a CI/CD pipeline and GitHub and Jenkins, that's not going to go either. And when I talk about culture and technology, I think about chicken or the egg. Which came first? Use technology to change culture, or change culture to use technology? And when I talk about or think about changing culture using technology, I always think about the mobile phone that changed the culture forever. And then when I talk about, and over the years you have seen from the light bulbs to wheels to microwaves and all those things, technology actually transformed the culture, and there are enough proofs. So my view is that culture and technology go hand in hand. So start together with both in your mind when you start your DevOps journey. Crawl, walk, and run. Don't start a big bang DevOps transformation. It will be a lot of pain, and chances are that it will probably fail and go underneath, and nobody will even talk about it. There are enough cases in the industry where a big bang DevOps digital transformation failed and never came up out of the water. So I'll say start small, walk, and then run if possible. And again, it depends upon what you are delivering. Collaboration, transparency, ownership, and trust. And I put this together in a single thread because all these are just one thing, that is the culture. Of course, we talked about collaboration between teams, between people, between leaders. Transparency, there's no hidden thing from anyone. Anything that is going through your pipeline or the process or your delivery or product should be transparent, whether there are bugs or there are incidents or there are other failures, it should be transparent. Total ownership, and I'm going to talk about some of these in my later slide, and trust. That is the single most important thing that I have seen in a DevOps transformation. Trusting people. It's not that you trust with your eyes closed, it's trust but verify. That's always been the case. So focus on that. And then safety first. And I think I'm going to talk about the safety first approach in an enterprise later. Bottoms up and top down. How to start DevOps? Should I go bottom up or top down? I think in my case, I have seen grassroots level initiation always worked. But then at some point, you need support and encouragement from the top. There are enough conferences, enough training material, enough blog posts written on actually training developers or engineers or a mid-level management group about DevOps, but there are not enough material available for leaders, senior leaders in an organization to actually teach them or tell them stories about how to transform, how a particular enterprise has transformed themselves. And I think those stories need to be told to the leadership so that they can actually force some of these practices down. Ignite fire of innovation, and as a part of that transformation, the leaders, their job should be to ignite fire of innovation or encourage the people to innovate on, instead of writing down, these are the things thou shalt do. Provide air cover. I think this is very important, and going back to the safety culture, a lot of times during this transformation, there will be a lot of failures. As I said, these are my learnings. Underneath, there are a lot of failure stories that I don't talk about. But if any of these failures is taken for an instance by the leadership and the people are penalized, that will be the end of it, right? So providing that air cover is very, very important for the leaders. There will be failures in any of your transformation process. There will be incidents, production incidents. There will be bugs, but you have to provide the air cover for people to safely cultivate their innovation. Evangelize reuse versus recreation. This is one of the things that you'll probably see in any of these big-scale DevOps, CI/CD, continuous delivery transformation, that everybody then starts running and creates their own little solution. Everybody has a pipeline. Everybody has a Jenkins. Everybody has their own stuff, their own way. Everybody is doing the same thing, but they all feel that theirs is the best. So in those cases, you'll run into an uncontrolled situation, and the leadership should come in and actually evangelize and reward people for reusing rather than recreating something that already has been done. And I think I have seen this, and I see this every day, not only in my organization, but many other organizations. Reuse is a challenge in this area because there is always these shiny things that the developers and engineers want to get their hand on, like I want to create my own Kubernetes cluster. You want to create your own Kubernetes cluster? Go ahead. Yours doesn't match my requirement, so I'll have my own. Those need to be stopped. Project versus product, and I think that's a big theme as of today, because product versus project has this thing called product is long-term, is going to stay as long as the product stays, versus project, which is, okay, I'm done with this project, the project ended, and all the people are gone, and then the question is, who is supporting the product on an ongoing process? So there has to be a product team behind this. And business goal versus IT goal, a lot of times in this DevOps transformation, everything seems to be very IT-oriented. Well, we need this pipeline, we need this scanning thing, we need this test automation tools, we need this test data management tool. All these things seem to be very IT-centric. And business always seem to be like standing from a distance thinking, what the heck is going on there? Why don't I get my features done? So I think the business goal should come into play. Do the business want to deliver every 5 seconds to production? That's the question. IT should be always prepared for that. Do the business want high-quality software to be sent to production customers' hand? Answer is yes. You just need to convince them and then make that as your business goal and then implement the IT processes or tools and technology to support that business goal. Fully dedicated team owning a product, and this is very important, as I said. Once the project is done, people are gone, there's nobody in the product, a new feature request comes in, then you gather more people who has no clue as to how the product was designed or architected or even the functionality, and it kind of starts all from the scratch. Instead of that, a fully dedicated team supporting the product, and you can scale up, scale down depending upon your feature request, but a fully dedicated team owning a product from soup to nuts is a must in this transformation. There's a good book by Mick, Project to Product. I think you should read that book. That's a good one. If you want to talk to Mick, you can just email him, I guess. So he's a good friend of mine. He's an awesome guy, by the way. Measurement is key. So in any of this transformation, all this technology transformation, talk about CI/CD pipeline to cloud implementation, or any of these, the question that business sometimes will ask, so what? What have we achieved? Then you kind of run into what to measure, right? Can I get a timer here? There's supposed to be a timer. I don't know how much time is left. 7 minutes? Okay. So what to measure is always a question. Now, in this, what to measure, you have to define what to measure, because there is no way the business is going to tell you what to measure. What are the KPIs, OKRs that you need to define along with your business, that this is what we are going to use as a metrics of our transformation success or even failure? Compared with who? And this is one of the critical things that I ran into personally. Yes, Amazon deploys every 46 seconds. Then another company deployed 10 times a day or 10 times an hour. And we are deploying once every 2 days. We suck. And then the problem with that is the measurement technique. What do you call a deployment? Is it like changing a server, changing a network setting, or deploying a new application, or changing a picture on the website? What do you call deployment? And the thing I found out that it depends. It depends upon the team, the company, and they define what you call deployment, and they count on basis of that. So I think if you want to deploy every 46 seconds, it will be a disaster for you in general, because it's the same change. If they deploy to make that change to 5,000 servers, it's called 5,000 deployments, but some people call that one deployment. So you measure yourselves and you try to compare with whoever you want to compare with, but don't get blown away by these humongous numbers and kind of get depressed. I'm not doing well. So again, be careful about when you measure what you measure and you compare with who. Is there a standard? No, absolutely not. There's no standard here. You define your own standard, because there are so many things, so many measurements that can be done in this space. You have to define your own standard. And there's a book, Accelerate, that I talked about before. I think you should read that book because it talks about many of these things. It's a pretty good book. And again, as I said, there's no standard. Don't just take that and try to implement. You have to, as I said, I keep saying that, build your own DevOps. Full stack engineers, that's one of my learning. I think they're hard to find. And all the full stack engineers have already been hired by Netflix or Amazon. They're not available for other enterprises. Even if you find, I have seen there is high probability of burnout, because that person will be actually working 24 hours a day, because that's the superhero. It's not scalable either. So the idea of full stack engineers in my mind is kind of myth. Yes, there are full stack engineers, and I know some of them. They're awesome, but there are not many. So I try to hire or encourage teams to hire people who will form a full stack product team. Instead of having one person knowing the whole thing, you need to have the team knowing the whole thing. And then it becomes scalable, there's no burnout, and then you'll get enough people managing your product. Speed for the win. Automation is key, small batch size is key, lower risk. And the reason is that if you think about the speed of delivery, it's not that the developers are coding faster, it's the processes that are delivering that same code out faster, because there are a lot of automation. And even if there are automations, unless the batch size is small, you can actually deliver faster. And most of the time, in big enterprises will not allow you to change the production systems in a big batch, because there are a lot of risk involved. So the whole idea is apply automation, do small batch so that the risk is lower, and so you can do continuous delivery. Because if something goes wrong, you can always back out faster. If you can send out faster, you can back out faster too. And then you get better mean time to recovery. And what is the optimum speed? Who knows? There are so many speed things in our own enterprises. Somebody delivers 10 times a day, somebody delivers once every day. Even some teams deliver once every week. It all depends upon your business need. So as I said, don't go about and compare yourself with other tech-savvy companies, because they are delivering a different, probably delivering a different product than what you are delivering. Two-speed IT, as I said, and bimodal doesn't work for us. We have seen that very, very dearly and nearly. Unless it's the same speed, things tend to break apart. Reaction to failures. This is one of the key things, as I said, safety culture. Failures will be there, things will break. It's just not if things break, it's when things break. And then how fast is the detection and recovery is the question. I think that's the key thing about DevOps. How fast can we detect, and how fast can we fix things? Blameless postmortem. I have attended a lot of postmortems, and postmortems usually tend to be kind of finger pointy, and things don't work quite well in that case. In that way, if you just say we don't care about who did it, we care about how it was done and where was the breaking point and what can we learn. So that will go pretty well. And again, learning, is it reactionary or strategic? We learned that if we have this code, then things break. Okay, just fix the code and write a document, never code that way, versus a strategic. Think about the bigger picture. How can we make sure no other developers can create the bug? What can be done in the whole pipeline? You cannot do it alone. It will never be done either. You need business, engineers, security folks, risk office, legal, HR, and anyone else you need it. If you just think about IT, and if you want to do this just in IT, it's not going to work. you need all these people in a big organization. Current focus areas across the industry. One is test automation, and I cannot stress this more. The biggest problem in continuous delivery, or biggest challenge, I should say, in continuous delivery is test automation or lack thereof. There are legacy systems that nobody has test cases about. There's test execution time. Even if I have 10,000 tests, when do I run it for every run? How do I optimize that? There are test metrics. What do I measure from the test metrics? These are all current focus areas in the industry, and Gary knows more than anyone in this room. I don't know if he's going to talk about that. Test data is a huge problem. How do I generate synthetic test data? How do I even have test data? And how do I actually version control test data with my change? That's a big focus area. And testing in production. How do I actually test my change in production with actual production data is a big focus area these days. Software quality. Again, this is not a new thing, but it's still a focus area because there are multiple facets of the quality. Talk about static scan, static security scan, dynamic security scan, and how do I even test for finding out my security loopholes. That's a big focus area. Tooling has been a big focus area in this area for a long while. And then bill of material, and it goes to the open source software packages that you use building your application. And how do I shift left? How do I actually tell developers what to use, how to use, and how not to break things? Is that the end of time? Okay, I'll just go through one thing that we are working on is the clean room. A lot of times, as I kind of want to, go back a little bit. So this is a quote that I always carry in my mind: uncontrolled variation is the enemy of quality. So how do I make sure that the things that I deliver has the highest quality? And there comes the well-managed concept, automated governance, quantitative versus quality measurement of the whole management of the pipeline. And in a continuous delivery, how do I actually well manage? And separation of duties is a big thing too. That's why we kind of working on a clean room thing, and it's nothing new. This has been there in the manufacturing industry for a while. The whole concept is that you kind of define your quote unquote room where your delivery process or things are cooked or made or manufactured, in this case software, and put measurements and controls to make sure you are actually processing or making your software within the boundary of the definition. If anything goes beyond your limit, you kind of stop and make sure everything is okay, and then you fix it and then run your engine again. So there are a few things that we defined to build this software clean room. All product pipelines are identified and registered. Everything is under source control. Every change is peer-reviewed. Production changes occur only via code changes. Nobody has access to production system. Every code change goes through various levels of testing and scanning. Pipeline stops or alerts if things fail. Evidence is captured and evaluated at near real time. And evidences are analyzed for discrepancies. So this is like your full automated governance around software delivery. I'll skip this. Few other things that I want to share. These are like off the side, my favorite DevOps hashtags. So hashtag DevOps hashtag. Number one is CESB, any clue? Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So as I said, culture is number one. BYOD, build your own DevOps, and that's kind of emphasizing on that again. YBYO, if you have built it, you own it. You build it, you own it. Next is YBYS, you build it, you secure it. I think John Willis came up with that. MVC, minimum viable compliance. In your enterprise, you have a lot of rules and regulations, and for your compliance requirements, define a minimum viable set of things that you want to implement to start with. And then JFDI, I cannot stress it more. A lot of enterprises always struggle with how do I start, who starts it, how do I know if it's time to go. So the JFDI stands for just do it. I'm not going to talk about what F means here. It's just doing it. And then my last slide today. I believe that at some point there will be all changes are auto-approved because of this automated governance process. And all of Chuck Norris's change control are full cycle, and they're always approved. And that's, I think, the nirvana of DevOps. And with that, I'll end. Thank you very much for having me. So I'm told to ask 2 questions, and if you can answer this, then you get some prize. So the first question is it going to be yes or no, or okay? Okay. Okay. Make it difficult. Just name one of the top challenges from DevOps implementation perspective. One of the top challenges or focus. Culture. I like that. Thank you.
All right, let's give a prize to him.
Congratulations. Thank you.
All right, before Topo asks the next question, whoever has the answer, please raise your hand so that we can point at you, then you can stand up and give the answer, because if everybody says the answer, we will not know whom to give the prize. We have limited number of prizes. So please raise your hands first, and then we'll come to you. Yes,
so
sir.
in situations in your company, if you run across a particular scenario where you're kind of stuck, you don't know what to do, you ask the leaders and they don't give you a clear-cut answer, or you ask your team lead, like, you don't get a clear-cut answer. In that case, what do? How do you actually go through your implementation, whatever you have in your mind? Reach out to the community. You already got a prize. You don't qualify. Sorry.
Okay, let us select somebody. So
yes.
I would request you to select somebody.
No, go ahead.
Okay, can we have the person at the back? Yes.
Yes. Yes. Yes. I think he I'll give it to him. Thank you.
All right, let's have the second prize. This gentleman out there. Okay, please come on stage first, and then take the prize from Topo.
Yes, that's right. Just do it.
Let's have a big round of applause, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Topo, for that insightful session. Before we move on, if any one of you have any questions for Topo, please raise your hand. We can just take 1 or 2 questions right now. We're a little short of time. Anybody who has questions for him? Anybody in the audience? Okay, people are still processing what you just told.
What do you feel is your biggest accomplishment
In
in this
my biggest accomplishment is I learned so much that I cannot even write it up fully, ever. That's my...
Thanks, Gary, for that question. Anybody else? All right, yes, sir.
Yes.
Various failures. Yeah.
Yeah. What is the biggest failure according to you?
Can you stop recording? Then we can talk about it.
Or your experience?
My biggest, there are so many in the big category that, one I'll mention here is that I kind of briefly mentioned about the toolings and the localization of toolings. Initially, my idea was that every product should have their own toolings decided by the product team. And I realized that it doesn't actually work in a big enterprise where you have a set of common controls. Because the challenge is not the controls are good. The challenge is having all the product teams implement the same controls the same way in the same kind of toolings. So I think my biggest failure was that my initial thought process was wrong. I was proven wrong, but I was not penalized. As I said, safety culture. So we kind of turned around and said that there are certain tools that are enterprise-wide that are common and must use for all the teams or product teams. But there are certain tools who can kind of plug into those standard tools.
All right, thank you, Topo, for that session. Let's give a big round of applause once again, ladies and gentlemen, to Topo. Okay, before we move on, if you want to give feedback about this session, please go to slido.com on your mobile. Enter the code DOIS, hashtag DOIS19 to enter the site. There you will see 5 options for each room. Please choose the room as main hall, and then go to the polls tab. Therein you will find a couple of questions with respect to this very session. I request all of you to please give us your valuable feedback. It will really help us to understand if we are meeting your expectations. All right? So before we move on, can we please request Dr. Nirati Chaudhary to please join us on stage and felicitate Topopal with a certificate and memento. Yes, ma'am, let's have you on stage as well. Can we please have it on stage? Thank you, sir, for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Topopal. Let's have a big round of applause, everyone. I want all of you to make some noise for him.